one of the big differences is that historically, id Software has been known for really good technology and really crappy tools. And that's just been kind of the nature of the way. We've always had such a small team that I might write something really neat technology, but you control it with text files and console variables and things. And we just haven't previously dedicated the resources to go ahead and do nice tools for things. But as we've grown as a company, we've had to have more people internally, and we are looking now at kind of getting back into trying to push technology licensing. We've hired dedicated tools programmers, support programmers, and we're putting people onto the tasks here. So we actually have some really neat tool technology here, both for specifically for creating all the mega textures and things, and also every other aspect of our development.
Okay, so like John was saying, now everything runs through id Studio. So all of our content creators use this tool to get their content into the game.
And this actually is part of the PC game, so anyone can drop down the console, type id Studio, and it's our development environment.
And of course, the biggest difference for us, and because our internal design calls for it, is these large outdoor areas. And as John was mentioning before, to say you can have these, truly unique every pixel on this scale, it's a monumental task if you just think about it that way. But what we've done is we've given the artists these tools, and again, this was all driven by our artists for a real game. So what we ended up with is almost like a combination of Photoshop and Modo, or a professional modeling tool and a professional painting tool. The artist can come in here and choose from a palette of these pre-created textures, and this is one of the big things here. They can just come in here, size up their paintbrush, choose a grass texture, paint down at any scale, and all of this information is changed. So you can quickly undo and re-add or change your mind at any point. If I go ahead and update that, then go back to the preview mode, you'll see that what I've done is basically introduce this grass texture. But
underneath the stamps. It's on top of the base model. So we've got 3 layers of control on here. And this took us some time to get right, where we went through a number of different styles. Like first I tried to see if we could live with just this kind of tile-based thing, and they couldn't get the large-scale detail that they wanted. It was great for scrubbing out paths, but you couldn't make a really cool cliff face so nicely. So we wound up with, it turns out it takes 3 different tools and 3 different layers of things, where they build the large-scale stuff in whatever modeling program they use. Just use grotesque amounts of textures, and then that gets baked down into this base layer of the mega texture. And then you can use the tiling to go in and do things like clean up edges where you've got textures meeting on there, scrub in your paths, and lay down, like all of the areas that are bright here are things that were done with tiles, and the dim areas are things that are showing through from the base layers. And then once they've kind of set up the things that they want here, then they can start using the discrete stamps to go in and add the specific little points of detail.
You can see this mode here. I'm hovering over the stamps that the artist added. So they can relatively quickly, by choosing from that palette, create a dramatically different looking landscape. And if I go into the actual stamp placement, again, I can come here, choose from the palette of stamps. Say I wanted rocks here. They can scale, rotate, stamp down, and there's no hit on performance, as John was saying. So they literally don't have to worry about all the things you don't want artists worrying about anyway. Let's see.
And that's while we could do, like even in Doom 3, we had some vestigial layer of you could project a decal or something onto the wall, but it had significant performance impacts where you had to do it in this it's sort of like a poetic sense in most video games where you have to do much with little, broad brush strokes where you can put one decal that's got to look really cool and it's got to make an impact here. But now they have the freedom to work in what tends to be a more natural way for artists is hundreds or thousands of tiny little brush strokes where they can go in and they can chip away at the things, making, shading and cautiously putting things in this fairly real-time environment where they're just kind of going in, they can knock it away, undo, redo, as just working on this incredibly large canvas.
And a good example of the power of it, this racetrack setting we have here was originally all rock. It was all this desert kind of canyon-y feel. And for gameplay needs, it called for a vendor, the vendor that you actually saw in the video. So we asked our artist to go in here and make something like a parking lot. So in about 10, 15 minutes, he came in here and took what was a basically rock, barren, desert scene. Started tiling with all the different asphalt tiles, and laid down that base. And of course, like John was saying, this is all updated real time for everybody that uses the game across all of the platforms. So kind of like he was surprised, I went back in, and like I said, within 15 minutes, he created what's a pretty convincing, asphalt parking lot scene. And that kind of power just normally doesn't exist.
And it's worth saying that this was our kind of break-in level where we were figuring out how the tools go, how the artists work on all of this. And there is less than 2 man-months of effort on this entire thing. And it looks pretty damn cool. And as we mostly have one guy doing 99% of the work on this. And as he's kind of built up the skill set now, things are going so much faster. All the work inside the little town scene there that he did was just in the space of over a few days, just going and making it look really cool and getting a lot of good value out of it. And this is the type of, that type of sort of visual detail there. That's not something that you really see in video games for the most part.
And as the tools are maturing, you can see it even from this model, this kind of tumbling mode we have in here. This specific tool was meant to take advantage of exactly what John implemented, is the ability to uniquely texture a large scale area. And without the tool, it just kind of goes hand in hand. And we've added these kind of neat little options that the artist can take good advantage of. Like if I want to add just the normal map, I can come in here and do just the bump map. And I can completely wipe out the old bump map that was underneath. And through these different techniques, by adding less diffuse or more diffuse, or giving them these different options, they're able to use the same palette and create a lot more dynamic. So
yeah, I mean, probably 90+% of the stamps are just as you would expect, normal stamp overs on there. But then they have the ability to go in and some of the striations on the canyons are done by just adding color without modifying the bumps underneath it. Or you can smooth out rocks by replacing part of the bump with a smoother one, or roughen up areas. So you can kind of work on a few different aspects of things there.
You can see it here. Again, this started with a giant piece of geometry with a completely unique and large texture. Take it, make it into our landscape mega texture, and then come back and add these kind of color, across these, across that large scale. So we've been able to capture both these large scale details, like the boulder you see here and these giant cliff faces, and down to that pebble level where the player needs to get out and walk around.
Because that was one of the real learning experiences for us, where I had some thoughts on how we would go about doing these things at the beginning. And in fact, enemy territory was sort of phase one, a sort of a beta of our thinking about this, where when I first did the original mega texture stuff for enemy territory, which is fundamentally, it's a different implementation than what we've got here because it's limited strictly to an outdoor stuff, while we virtualize everything. All the indoor things, all that stuff is virtualized in Rage. But the original thought and what we wound up doing for enemy territory was that there would be a procedural generator that generates a base layer, and then they could do some stamping on top. And they spent a lot of time on the procedural generator on there, and probably not as much as they should in the final detail stamping pass on there. But what we found out on here, we looked at the results from all of that, and in general, and I've said this for years, there's a spectrum of graphics programming opinion between synthesists and and pure data-driven people, and I'm way over on the data-driven side. I mean, not to say that there's no value from synthetic generation, but I never use synthetic stuff for actual rendering operations. It's only really has its place in content creation. But we looked at what we got out of Splash Damage, and I think there's some wonderful, lovely-looking scenes in there, but I think that if you've got talented artists, letting them actually create more of exactly what you want in here. And obviously, I think the scenes in Rage can be significantly more awe-inspiring than what we got in Enemy Territory, although Enemy Territory I do think sets the bar right now.
Yeah, I think that kind of freedom to hand touch every pixel was scary at first, but it's evolved to in a way that it actually gives the artist what they've been looking for the whole time.
Yeah, the world is their canvas to paint on.
Whether instead of giving them restrictions where, like John was mentioning, we had to take out half the art at the end of the project, now they can just make great art. They don't have to worry about all that. And this, again, is in the terrain editor, but we've added a lot of nice little features like an environment editor, so we can quickly change the post-processing. Again, this This is the same idea. It's giving the artist what they've always wanted in a nice package so they can utilize it.
And this is one of those things that turned out to be one of the big wins, because all these post-processing things, depth of field, color balance, glare effect, fog colors, it's really not that tough. It's not that big of a deal, but the artists totally love it. I mean, this was like the happiest thing that they that they got to just go through and do all of these different things. And they've got all these named different versions, like this is the mummy setting.
And again, having it part of id Studio and it being so modular, it took our tools programmer, literally a night to throw this in for them.
Do you feel this bridges the gap at all between asset creation for games like this and doing an animated types of movies, or is this a very different, or is this a very different type of setting?
It was an explicit goal of some of this that movies, if you look at it, they're so much more effective at time management than game development. I mean, a movie, it can go through pre-production and then in 6 months they can throw $100 million of effort at something and in the space of 6 months do fabulous things. No amount of money can do that in gaming.